Okay, so what you can see here is that I'm actually going to be measuring from the ceiling to the bottom horizontal support. And the reason is I want to make sure that I have enough space between the ceiling and the horizontal support for my totes that I want to put up there. You'll see that I went ahead and I secured the horizontal support in the center, and then I threw the level up there and I adjusted the board for level and then worked from the center to the outside of the board, securing it to wall studs. It's important that you find studs to secure this board into, as this will be one of the major weight bearing components of the shelf. Now you can see I'm actually measuring out, trying to find the ceiling joist there to see where to secure the top board for the vertical supports that you'll see here in a little bit. This again is a very important step in finding either joists or use some very heavy duty wall anchors so that a majority of your weight can be sustained off that top board there. Another thing that you may want to do, and what I actually did in this video, is install some leg supports, which will take a lot of that load off of that top board that you're going to see. If you don't install the leg supports that we'll see later on in the video, again, you're really going to want to make sure that you hit some form of a joist there and secure it so that the weight can be supported safely, as it'll be the second most important step of this whole shelf building process. So I'm doing this by myself, and what you can see is on the ceiling there, instead of making it one long piece, I cut it in two to make it more manageable. You see I'm working overhead there, so holding the piece of the 2x4 up as well as securing it, it can be cumbersome. So I'm actually double checking, triple checking my work there, make sure that it's all measured out. If you get these two 2x4s incorrect in your measurements, it's going to throw your whole shelf off. So I really took my time and made sure that I measured out the correct distance from the wall down to the horizontal support you see there with the level, and then also out across the ceiling to make sure that I have the right depth to the shelf. You can actually see another shelf that I built in the background there prior to this one, and this video is going to skip around a little bit. It's going to show other parts of the shelf that you actually see completed in the background versus the one that we're actually working on right this minute. And the reason is just due to camera batteries dying and things like that. So I just want to make sure that I captured all the steps. So I had to film at different times. Again, just measuring out from the wall to that ceiling 2x4, making sure that that it's correct. You'll see that I'm going back to that other 2x4 and I'm adjusting it. I was in towards the wall too much. I didn't have the correct depth, so I had to go back in there, loosen it up, and bump it out about an inch. As mentioned before, went ahead and cut that top ceiling board in half to make it more manageable. Another tip here really is that if you have two ladders and you're doing it by yourself, that is absolutely a lifesaver. I'll tell you too that if you don't have two ladders, it might be a little difficult. I would say either get an extra set of hands to help you, or grab two ladders. And you'll see I support some of the wood on the ladders. I also jump back and forth from the ladders. It keeps me from having to move them quite a bit, and it just helps out in general time savings. Okay, so now we're going in and I'm installing the vertical supports there. Those 2x4s run from the outside of the ceiling board down, and then we're going to go ahead and later on we're going to connect another board at the bottom. One of the important steps here to remember is that you need to measure your totes or whatever you plan, the majority of whatever you plan to store, measure the width and make sure that in the width it's enough to allow you to slide that in there. You'll see that I'm using my level. I just want to make sure. A lot of this 2x4 lumber is twisted, and you could have some inconsistency in the wood. Do your best when you go to buy your wood that you choose straight boards so that you don't have too much to worry about. So before I mentioned that we jumped around a little bit in the videos. This is actually same type of shelf, just the opposite wall. We're cutting the 3/4 plywood and dropping it into the bottom as the shelf. You'll notice too that the other 2x4 is already installed on the bottom of those vertical supports. And basically all that happens is that 3/4 plywood just sits on top of there, and then we're going to secure it with some screws. I'm actually putting in a support which I first secured to a wall stud and then secured to the outside 2x4s, and then I toe nailed it in the back to the other 2x4. I'm using 3-inch screws here. And what I focused on doing with these supports on the bottom is not putting them right in line with the vertical supports. I wanted to distribute the load bearing across different sections, so I kind of staggered it. No rhyme or reason here to the width. I'm not doing 16 inches on center or anything like that. I'm spreading it out to help strengthen up the shelf. So now we're going in and I'm putting I think it was 2-inch screws for the 3/4 shelf. You really probably don't have to do this, but I didn't want the shelf sliding around as I was moving totes in and out, and I think for longevity purposes it'll serve its purpose. I just don't want the wood to be loose up there. That was just a personal preference. It'll stay up there just fine without it. You'll see that I'm actually adding in screws to the vertical supports there at the end of that that portion of the video. That was just because I needed to add a couple more. I'd run out of screws. So this is interesting. So now I went in. This is the next day. I put quite a bit of weight on these shelves, and everything was holding securely, and everything was fine. But to me, I was like, I've got some extra space down here. I'm going to go ahead and add some leg support. So what I did was I measured from the bottom of the shelf to the floor, and I added 1/8 of an inch. And what I did was I pushed up on the shelf just a little bit, just to take some of that load off of that ceiling 2x4 that we used to secure the top. And that's just for strength. I don't know that you even need these legs. I was doing pull-ups on one of the shelves and it was fine. It wasn't moving or anything like that. But I went ahead and added these just for a little more security. You'll see that I'm going back and forth, trimming a little bit at a time. I just wanted to make sure that these were really snug going into the bottom of the shelf there. I wanted them to do the heavy lifting on the weight support. I didn't add 3. I just did two legs per shelf. And really that'll be determined by how long you want your shelf to be. These were around 12 feet long, and the tote opening was around 36 inches tall by around 25 inches wide, and I want to say 30 inches deep. So it was a lot of space. I'd appreciate it if you could like and subscribe, and the plans will be available on my shop, and that'll be down in the video details.